Okay, brethren, we're continuing a topic we started last week. And initially, you might think, if you're thinking of God up in heaven, that God might perhaps be governing the entire universe all on his own. So there's a big throne and there's God on it, and that's it, right? Maybe some angels here and there, but God's on his own. Scripture shows us that's not really the case. God appears to govern with the help of, support of, assistance of a large council of individuals, other spirit beings. It's a bit like if you think of ancient Egypt or ancient Syria or ancient Babylon, you'd have a king in those countries, and the king is in complete authority. He is the supreme monarch, but he doesn't just run the entire show on his own, just one being, one individual. Any king of Assyria, Babylon, will have a large court, a royal court of individuals, officials, helpers, delegates, who will help him govern, help him to carry out his will in his kingdom. It's the same with God. He has individuals who provide support for him. Now, if you're looking at a king of Babylon, king of Chaldea, king of Assyria, whatever, the highest positions in his kingdom are normally given to his sons. So the sons of the king get the top jobs. That's still the case many places today, like, say, Saudi Arabia. And the sons of the king are often called princes, which we'll see later today in Scripture. I mean, for example, we've got our King Charles III over here. He's got two sons, princes. Prince William, who will be the next king, one imagines, all being well, and Prince Harry, who is a bit of a loser, currently living in California somewhere. But princes, because the sons of a king... And that would be the case in ancient Babylon. You'd probably find over there that the king's sons are the senior executives. It's the same in God's kingdom, God's divine council. Now, in biblical terminology, these individuals who support God, advise him, help his will come to pass, are referred to as gods or sons of God. We've seen that last week. We'll see it again this week. But let's start in Psalms 82. Which makes it pretty plain, I would have thought. So Psalms 82, let's read verse 1 when we get there. And here we read, God, the word Elohim, commonly translated God with a capital G, as it is here. God stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judges among the gods, plural, small g. Hebrew word is Elohim again. So here's God, the Most High God. I guess we think of him as Jehovah God. He stands in the congregation or the assembly of the mighty, and he judges among the gods, plural. So clearly there are gods, other gods, apart from, the God, capital G, the Most High God. There are other gods, and it says here that God stands in the congregation, the assembly of the mighty, and judges among the plural gods. Other translations, for example, the ESV, the English Standard Version, or the Revised Standard Version, the RSV, they translate verse 1 here as, God has taken his place in the divine council. And that's what we seem to see there. It's a council, a royal court. There are many, many individuals, spirit beings there, right? And some are sons of God, or princes, right? If we carry on reading here, verses 2 through 5, we'll see that God's unhappy with the gods. That's in front of him here. He says, verses 2 through 5, I guess, how long will you gods, judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? It seems that these gods have positions of authority or responsibility over subjects. We'll get later to see exactly who we're talking about there, right? And they're failing. These gods are failing to do what they should be doing. They've got Jehovah God as an example that they could imitate, but they're not. So again, verse 2, how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Free them from the hand of the wicked. They do not know, I think he's talking about the God beings here, they do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are unstable. The principles they should be applying are not there. And so all the societies that they are over governing are falling apart. They're unstable. They're breaking down. You see that today in our societies. You look around Britain today, it's breaking down, right? It's not running smoothly like a well-oiled machine. It's breaking down. Lots of straightforward foundational principles of life are not being followed today. And this was the problem with these gods. They'd failed their subjects, and God's not happy with them. So he's judging them, and he's going to punish them. Next couple of verses, verses 6 through 7. I said, you are gods. This is true. God says, you are gods. Small g, O-D-S, plural. Elohim in Hebrew. You are gods for sure. And all of you are children of the Most High, sons of God Most High. Think the Hebrew is El Elyon. Sons of Elyon. You are gods. You are sons of the God. But, despite all of that, you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes, even though they are spirit beings and God beings and sons of Elyon, I think, in the Hebrew, sons of God, you will die. God's going to terminate their existence. He created them, he can uncreate them. And he will do that because they've failed in their responsibilities, right? And God's not going to take it. He's going to deal with that in the fullness of time. Right? And there are quite a number of scriptures in the Bible that talk about other gods. It's a concept that sometimes I think people struggle with. Well, there's only one God, surely. I mean, God is just God. We're monotheistic, aren't we? There's only one God. There aren't other gods. Well, Scripture says otherwise. There are many gods and sons of God and princes and so on and so forth. Let's have a look at a couple of places since we're in the book of Psalms. Let's try Psalms 95. So Psalms 95. And today we'll be looking a little bit more closely at these other gods and what their responsibilities are and in what way they might have failed them. Psalms 95, we're going to read verses 1 through 3. O come, let us sing to the Lord, or Jehovah. Capital L, capital O-R-D is Jehovah. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. Let us shout joyfully to him with psalms. For Jehovah is the great God and the great King above all gods. So there are gods, quite a number of them, I believe, but Jehovah God is above them all. Verse 3, for Jehovah, Jehovah, is the great God. He's the great King above all gods, way above them, far superior to them. Now, it doesn't mean, as perhaps in a former life I probably thought, God's greater than a lump of stone or a tree trunk carved into the shape of a fish or an ox or something. Well, that's ridiculous praise to say God's greater than a lump of stone. I'm greater than a lump of stone, at least in my opinion. You may think differently, right? But I think I'm superior to a lump of stone or a wooden carving, right, of a ox or a whale or something. But to say God's greater than a lump of stone is like, well, this was mean. But God's greater than gods, spirit beings who have positions of some responsibility and authority, but God's the great God. Jehovah's the great God above all these gods. That's praise. And we realize how much authority and power these other spirit beings have, these princes, these sons of God, but the great God, Jehovah, is way, way above them all, out of sight. So look at Psalms 135 whilst we're here. Psalms 135. We'll read verses 3 to 5. Praise Jehovah, for Jehovah is good. Sing praises to his name, for it is pleasant. For Jehovah has chosen Jacob for himself, Israel for his special treasure. And without getting ahead of the game, the last scripture we've got today points out that Jehovah God chose Israel and Jacob for himself. Other nations, no, but God chose this specific nation, Israel, for himself. As it says there, Jehovah has chosen Jacob for himself, Israel for his special treasure. Not other nations, but that nation as a special treasure. Get to that later. Verse 5, but I know, or for I know, that Jehovah is great and our Lord is above all gods. And there's lots of places where it talks of all gods, many gods. But the God, Jehovah God, is above them all, right? And I think there's a couple of places, we did look at them last week, I'm not turning to them today, where God says something along the lines of, there's no other God beside me. People go, oh, what is that a contradiction? Because God says there's no other God beside him, but we read here that he's above all gods. How does that make sense? Well, there's no contradiction. I think we explained it last week by saying that God's simply announcing that he is unique. He is incomparable. There are no other gods anywhere like him. Like, for example, we looked at a couple of similar phrases in Isaiah, I think in Nehemiah last week, Zephaniah, talking about cities. So you got, Babylon, which says, there's no other beside me. Well, what's that supposed to mean? Babylon's a city. There's a lot of cities. Babylon been attacking lots of them, right? Babylon's not saying we are the only city. That would be an absurd conclusion to draw. What Babylon means is there's no city beside me in terms of I'm incomparable. I'm so far superior. You can't even compare other cities to us here in Babylon. And in Zephaniah, it was Nineveh's turn to say, there's no other beside me. I am the city. No other city even remotely compares to Nineveh in its greatness, its power, and its might, and its majesty. That's the same with God. There are other gods, we just read several places there where they're mentioned, but none of them even approach to God's greatness. God is incomparable, right? No other God is on a par with the God. I mean, for example, the God, Jehovah, is the creator God. Other gods don't create as far as I know, but the God created everything. So far superior to any gods plural is the creator God. Then again, creator God, Jehovah, is eternal. He's always been. As far back as you go, 100 billion years cubed, God was there. God is eternal. The other gods aren't eternal. They had a beginning. They've been created by the creator God. So the other gods are not eternal. And of course, the God, Jehovah, is the Most High God. That's one of his names, Most High. That means others aren't as high. So Jehovah God is incomparable. He stands entirely on his own in that sense. But there are other gods. We've seen that already. Then last week we turned briefly to Revelation, book of Revelation, to look at the throne room of God, which is mentioned in Revelation 4 and 5. There's the throne room, there's God there, and there are, amongst other beings, 24 elders sitting on thrones with golden crowns on their head. Now, we don't know much about them, but I have to assume they are part of the divine council. 24 special beings in heaven at God's throne area. And these 24 elders are spirit beings, and they have thrones, which means that they have authority. They are governing, they are ruling, and they've got golden crowns. Well, a crown is what you wear as a symbol of your authority. You got a golden crown, you're sitting on a throne, 24 of them, right? So that's part, I believe, of the divine council. We see a little window there into the divine council mentioned in Revelation, right? And you can see throughout the Bible lots of references to the divine council once you know what you're looking for, right? Now, the sons of God, like I said earlier, if you go to a physical kingdom, you have the king. His sons typically are the ones to whom he gives great authority. They're part of his ruling executive, the sons of the king. The same in God's divine council. The sons of God are given special high levels of authority, the sons of God. Right? They're also called, as we'll see in a moment, also called the Watchers. Interesting title. I guess they're watching. All right? We'll see this in the book of Daniel if we want to turn there. So if you find Prophet Daniel, and we'll head to chapter 4 when we get there. And we'll see these references to the Watchers, part of this divine council, that helps God to deliver his purposes and plans. Now, chapter 4, we will cut into the text context in a minute, but just to give you the background, Daniel 4 is Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And he sees this beautiful tree, a great majestic tree, and the birds nesting in it and the animals underneath the branches. It's a beautiful tree, really impressive, but it gets chopped down. Only the stump remaining. And Nebuchadnezzar's, what's this supposed to mean? He can tell it's a significant dream. It's playing in his mind. Eventually he calls Daniel to come along and do the necessary, explain what this dream of mine pictures. What does it mean for me? And Daniel does his stuff and explains. So let's pick up the story in chapter 4 and verse 10. And Nebuchadnezzar says, he's talking to, explains to Daniel what he saw in his dream. These were the visions of my head while on my bed. I was looking, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. And he continues to describe this fantastic, majestic tree, but drop down to verse 13. I saw in the visions of my head while on my bed, and there was a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. So the watcher is a holy one, a holy being, a spirit being coming down from heaven. I'm going to suggest it's a member of the divine council. I'm going to suggest it's a son of God, because I believe the term watcher is a synonym for son of God. You get that in some other non-biblical sources. Verse 14, he, this watcher, cried out and said, chop down the tree, cut off its branches, strip off its leaves, scatter its fruit, let the beasts get out from under it. So the watcher and the birds from its branches, the watcher announces this curse, if you like, on the great tree, right? And this is just Nebuchadnezzar explaining to Daniel what he'd seen in his strange dream. Let's drop down to verse 17. And in the dream, Nebuchadnezzar continues, the watcher is heard to say, this decision to drive you away, or drive the tree away and cut it down to a stump and so on, this decision is by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence of punishment by the word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, gives it to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. So in the dream, Nebuchadnezzar hears this watcher, this holy one, say, the decision to do this is a decree of the watchers, the holy ones, the sons of God. The sentence is by the word of the holy ones. They've done it. They've chosen to do this. And they're doing it to teach mankind about the Most High God. So it's a lesson, a very public lesson to mankind, in this time at least, that the Most High is fully in charge. He's sovereign of the universe. And the watchers make this decision. They have this sentence. It's their decree. The watchers have decreed this. The divine council have decreed what's going to take place, right? And of course, at that point, Daniel sees what's going to happen. He's a bit upset because it seems to get on okay with Nebuchadnezzar. So he realizes that this is a punishment heading towards Nebuchadnezzar because he's fairly arrogant. Not a great surprise when you're a super duper emperor. So let's read verses 23 to 25. So he's now explaining. It says, the tree is you, Nebuchadnezzar. Let's carry on. And as much as the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave its stump and roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze in the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with the dew of heaven, let him graze with the beasts of the field till 7 times, 7 years, pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king. They shall drive you, O king, from men. Your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times or 7 years shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. It's going to humble Nebuchadnezzar by living like an animal, Pharaoh out in the fields under the trees and bushes for 7 years. But notice in verse 24, this is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king. So earlier it says it's a decree of the watchers. Here it says the decree of the Most High, right? Well, obviously they're complementary, both go together. What I think is happening is the watchers made the decision, right? They took the initiative. They decided what to do to Nebuchadnezzar to teach the people of that day how high God is. And God's endorsed it. He's sanctioned it. He's given it his thumbs up. He's rubber stamped it. So it's a decree of the watchers working in conjunction with the Most High Sovereign God, Jehovah. So you can see either did it. But the watchers say it's our decree. I think that's right. The watchers have got authority delegated to them, and they've participated fully in intervening in the affairs of mankind in Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar. That's an authority they have, right? There are many other gods and sons of God in God's council, in God's universe. Many of them, I think, are good, righteous. God can trust them. But a number of them are not so good. A number of these God beings, sons of God, are corrupt and wicked. We saw that in Psalms 82. God says, look, you should have done this. You haven't done it. You've utterly failed. You're going to die. This is my conclusion. You're going to die like men. You're not men, but you'll die like men. Just as they die, you'll be dying as well. So get that through your noggin. You're going to die, right? So we're in the book of Daniel and looking at these spirit beings that exist out there, such as the watchers, the sons of God, or princes is a term I've used a couple of times because sons of a king typically called princes, and we'll see that in a moment. If we turn to Daniel chapter 10, let's read verses 1 through 3. Daniel 10. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. The message was true, but the appointed time was long in the future. And he understood the message and had understanding of the vision. In those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant food, no meat or wine came into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. So it's sort of like a partial fast, like Catholics often do in Lent. They give up something that's pleasant. My mum used to give up cigarettes for Lent, penance. She also gave up sugar, like in her tea and so on.
She did for good, actually. Yeah.
So, here Daniel gives up some of the pleasant stuff because he's partially fasting as he seeks to draw closer to God to understand what's exactly going on. Right, so let's drop down and read verses 4 through 6. So what God does is he sends a glorious angel. Verse 4 through 6. Now on the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was by the side of the great river that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man, clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in colour, the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. This is clearly a very impressive angel. I don't think it names him around here, but I've always assumed it's Gabriel, the angel. I think that's quite likely, but not explicitly mentioned here. But I'll use the term Gabriel, right? And let's drop down and read verses 12 through 14. So God sent the angel Gabriel to reveal more about this vision to his prophet Daniel. Verses 12 through 14. Then he, the angel, said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. Well, but Daniel was praying for 21 days. But it says here that from day 1, your words were heard, and it looks like God said, okay, Gabriel, off you go. Yeah. Take the message to my prophet Daniel, my beloved prophet Daniel. Off you go. Get that message to him, right? Verse 13, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I'd been left alone there with the kings of Persia. So the angel, Gabriel, let's say, is sent off by God to go to Daniel with this understanding, and Daniel didn't get the message for 21 days because the angel couldn't get through. It says there, verse 13, the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me, opposed me, 21 days. I couldn't get past him. He was holding me back. So here's a spirit battle of some sort where the angel Gabriel, on God's instructions, is trying to get to Daniel, can't get to him for 3 weeks because another spirit being, the prince of Persia, and of course prince is a son of the king, son of God, right? The prince of Persia, the God being the son of God who is over Persia, right? In the Greek version, it's an archon, A-R-C-H-O-N. That word appears frequently in the New Testament, talking of these spirit beings, these principalities, an archon. So this archon, or prince of Persia, holds up, stops Gabriel. Not going past me, mate. Thou shalt not pass. And the battle takes place. And it looks like Gabriel was struggling to get past this must be a very powerful being, right? Because if this is Gabriel, I assume he's a fairly powerful angel. But he can't do it.
He's near the top.
He can't get past the prince, the son of God, the archon, who is over Persia. Can't do it. And it requires support, reinforcements. And it says there, behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. Right? So Michael is an archangel, it says there, chief prince. The word prince again is archon. Archon, angel, an archangel. Michael is an archangel. We see that in the New Testament. It says here, Michael, one of the chief princes. So that suggests that there's more than one archangel, right? Several archangels. How many?
7.
Don't know. I think the Catholics count 7 archangels. We've even got names. So Raphael and a few others.
Gabriel.
But that's Catholic theology. I'm not going to go there. But anyway, Michael the archangel, right? He turns up. When he turns up, he blasts through the opposition, and that allows Gabriel, or whichever angel it was, to finally get through to Daniel with the message. Verse 14, now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision, which he's going to explain, refers to many days yet to come. Thankfully, Daniel gets the message, and we've read it in the past when we've been through the book of Daniel. But the point here is that reveals to us there is a spiritual prince, a son of God, a God, right, an archon over Persia. Today we call it Iran, right? And there's more than just Persia. It's not just one nation. If we turn to verse 20, then he, the angel, said, do you know why I have come to you? And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I have gone forth, indeed, the prince of Greece will come. Another spirit being, another God, another son of God, another archon, this time over Greece, or the Hebrew is Javan, which means Asia Minor. The biggest country in that part of the world today is what we generally call Turkey, right? So, that tells us that there is a prince, a spiritual ruler, an archon over Greece, as well as over Persia, right? Which implies, I think, that the nations have got powerful spiritual rulers over them. Gods or sons of gods over the nations. And I've got to think it's not just Persia and Greece, that's all that's named there, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that other countries have got gods, princes, archons over them. Powerful beings over them, like, for example, Assyria, Babylon, Arabia, Egypt, other countries, maybe Scotland, maybe the USA, maybe Mexico, maybe Austria, France, Germany, right? Morocco, Tunisia. Okay, that's where we're sort of heading, that direction. But if there are gods over Persia and Javan or Greece, then why not other nations as well? It would to me, make a lot of sense. And talking of Egypt, that might explain the 10 plagues which took place on Egypt. Right, you're familiar with those, Book of Exodus, and leading up to the escape of Israel from Egypt. But why 10 plagues? Why not 3 plagues? Right? Why 10 plagues? Well, was it just at random? Did God just say, you know what, let's throw in a few locusts and let's throw in a few hailstorms and let's throw in the odd bit of flies or frogs? No, it was deliberate. God focused his 10 plagues on the gods of Egypt because God is going to defeat publicly and show up and humiliate the gods of Egypt. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 12. Exodus and chapter 12. And verse 12. Exodus 12:12. For I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. God is going to demonstrate his superiority over the gods of Egypt. Now, if there aren't any gods of Egypt, if it's just imaginary delusions in the minds of the Egyptians, then God's not getting much praise out of that, is he? Well, God says, you know what? I defeated the lunatic ideas that these Egyptians had in their brains. That tells you nothing. But if there are actual gods of Egypt, real beings in the spirit realm who are governing and messing up Egypt, if God defeats those publicly in front of the Egyptians' eyes and they see their gods being whipped, right, then, oh my word, in that case, Jehovah is a great God because he's able to defeat and humiliate and embarrass the gods of Egypt, right? And that's what these 10 plagues reveal. There will be a slide in just a moment, but before we get there, let me just mention 3 of the plagues, sort of at random. Plague number 1, the Nile and the waters were turned to blood, right? That's probably a punch in the nose to the god Hapi, Hapi, and Osiris. Those are 2 gods who are responsible for the River Nile being healthy and supporting the irrigation of Egypt. So vitally important. I mean, people lived off of the Nile. It was crucial, critical. And the god of it was Hapi and Osiris. God turns the Nile to blood. That's one in the nose. Then you got the second plague, which was frogs everywhere. Frogs in your kitchen, frogs in your pantry, frogs in your bed, frogs in the dog's kennel. Everybody look, frogs, frogs, frogs. That's a punch in the nose to the frog-headed god, whose name was Heket, Hequet, which was a goddess of fertility, but she had a frog's head. So one in the nose for her. And then the 9th of the plagues was the plague of darkness for 3 days and 3 nights, right? That's really embarrassing for the god Ra, who is the sun god, who's obliterated for 3 days and 3 nights. So that's what God was doing. So I think we've got a couple of slides we can show you. So the first one is just those 3 gods there. So you've got Ra on the left. That's the sun god. That's sort of a 3-dimensional drawing at the bottom. Up the top, I think, is taken from the tombs of the Egyptians. And then in the middle, you've got Hapi, which is the god of one of the gods of the Nile, Osiris being the other. And then you've got Heket shown there on the right, which is the goddess of fertility, who has a frog's head, if you can see that on the top there, and a frog's body as well in the bottom one. Then we've got another one, another slide. You may not be able to read all of that on the screen, but what that basically is, somebody put together a list of all the gods who were embarrassed by these plagues. So on the left-hand side there, you've got all the plagues that took place, and then you've got the gods, Hapi and Heket, Geb and Shu and Hathor and Isis and Sekhmet and Nut and Seth and Bastet, and then Ra we just
Ra.
mentioned. So those are the gods of Egypt.
Didn't Nathan put them together?
And when God thumped those publicly and embarrassed all those gods because they couldn't withstand Jehovah or his servant Moses, went around and said, this is going to happen. The dust is going to turn to gnats and so on. The flies are going to arrive. The locusts are going to arrive. The boils will come. The goddess of healing can't prevent that happening. So all the gods of Egypt, were embarrassed, humiliated publicly. Nobody at the end of the 10 plagues could have any confidence in one of their gods or goddesses because all of them had utterly failed against the might and the power of Jehovah God, who is the most impressive of the gods, right? So there were lots of gods, it seems, in Egypt, but if there are different gods over the nations, over Egypt and Assyria and Babylon and the USA and Canada and so on, if there are different gods over the nations, when did that come about? When did God separate the nations onto which he then allocated gods or sons of God? When did that happen? The answer is we turn to Genesis chapter 11. Genesis chapter 11 is the story of the Tower of Babel. Well, in Britain we say Babel. I think in America they typically say Babel. But,
That's because they can't speak properly.
English is the language of the King James Version. And the language, this is God's country, so what we do here is what counts. So we call it the Tower of Babel, but I get it. Once you go across the pond, you use Babel.
Them rough times.
So let's read verses 1 through 4 to start with. Now the whole earth had one language and one speech. Just to back up a fraction, this takes place shortly after Noah's flood. So the whole world is destroyed in the flood. The flood ends, Noah and his 3 sons and 3 wives come out of the ark, and they start populating the earth, right? And God tells them, I think it's chapter 9, verse 1, just turn there. So God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That's God's command. Get out there, fill the earth, multiply. I want lots of folk on the earth. Go to it. But it's not what they're going to do. They're going to actually do the opposite. So verse 1, now the whole earth had one language and one speech, and it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, from where the ark was, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. Well, it's supposed to spread around the world, around the earth. Then they said to one another, come, let us make bricks, and bake them thoroughly. They had brick for stone, they had asphalt for mortar, and they said, come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. They don't want to do that. They want to stay together in one place. And they decided to build this tower. And I think most scholars believe it's a ziggurat style of pyramid. So it's a pyramid, a stepped pyramid, like a ziggurat. I think we have a slide of that. Or artist's impression, I should say. Obviously, nobody was there with a camera at the time, but that's an artist's impression of a sort of ziggurat-styled tower, at the top of which would be, it seems, a temple. It's implied that what the people of those days wanted to do was not to scatter, not to go abroad, not to fill the earth, but to stay together as one people and almost invite God to come to them. We're going to build a temple, and God, you can come to our temple. But this is rejecting God's plain instructions. What are you playing at? You've just witnessed the flood, or you can see the effects of the flood still on the earth at this time. You realize what God did to wicked people, and here you are. God says, spread out over the earth, multiply, replenish the earth, get busy. And they say, oh, no, I'll tell you what, we'll just stay here. We'll just all come together here. We'll build a big temple on top of this tower of ours, and you can come and visit us, God, when we ask you to. Arrogant nonsense. So let's move on. Read verses 5 through 9. But Jehovah came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And Jehovah said, indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. So you wonder quite take that literally, it means that they could be building nuclear power stations 20 years later. Rockets, it says nothing that they imagine will be withheld from them. So it's like, can't allow that to happen. This is far too soon to get to these, end time skills and so on. Verse 7, come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Well, it says there, let us go down. Who's the us? Well, it certainly seems quite likely it's Jehovah God speaking to his divine council, the other spirit beings who are part and parcel of his universe administration. He says to them, look, you can see what they're doing, all right? We're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to put an end to that because God's going to do that. But he's talking to his divine council, I believe. That's what we got there. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, or Babel if you prefer, because there Jehovah confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. So they were driven apart because all the languages have changed just instantly in a moment, and they can't talk to each other. So all the folk who understand each other and can communicate, they gather together and they go off one direction. All those who speak Spanish go that way. Those who speak French go that way. Those who speak German go that way. Those who speak, Hindi go that way. Those who speak English go the other way. I mean, there's prototypes of these languages. I mean, the English that we speak today is different from 1,000 years ago, so I'm sure it was even more different back in the days of Babel. But all those who spoke a particular language that they understood went off together. So God got his wish, got his will. The nations parted, some here, some there, covering eventually the entire earth as separate nations, right? That's the origin of the worlds and nations. Now, Genesis 10, since we're here, we can look at Genesis 10, because Genesis 10 outlines that there were 70 nations at this time. So what you got is, in the story, you got the flood ending, and it talks about, the people come out of the ark and go off to spread around the earth, but fail, right? But in Genesis 10, we have what the nations became, and then Genesis 11 tells us what prompted that split and that segregation. But Genesis 10 gives us the names of the nations, of which there are 70. Right? So we're not going to read all of it because we don't need to, but let's just start with Genesis 10 verses 1 and 2. Now this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tiras. We've seen the name Javan before. That's often called Greece, right? So what happens here is you get the three sons of Noah. You got Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and now Genesis 10 outlines where the nations came from. It starts here with the sons of Japheth with these various characters, then it talks about their sons in turn, and so on, dropping down to verse 6. The sons of Ham, as opposed to Japheth, the sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, which is Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush in turn were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, Sabteka, and the sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan, and on it goes. Drop down to verse 21. And children were born also to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder. Eber, I think, father of the Hebrews. So it just outlines there all the descendants that came from Shem, from Ham, from Japheth, and it lists them all there. And dropping down to finish in verse 32. These were the families of the sons of Noah according to their generations in their nations. And from these, the nations were divided on the earth after the flood. They were divided at Tower of Babel when God intervened, confounded the languages, and at that point that prompted them to split. And that's what they split into. Now there's 70 nations there, and many people refer to Genesis 10 as effectively the table of the nations. I think we've got a slide for that. So it says there, the table of nations. It's quite well known. And you got there, Noah sort of at the top, and Japheth and Ham and Seth, Shem, and all the descendants of those nicely listed there. And if you count them up, there's 70 of them. So those are the 70 nations that began the world that we live in today. And it does seem at this point in time that God chose to disinherit the majority of the nations because it completely rejected. He says, get out there, fill the earth, replenish it, spread across the earth. And they said, no way. We're going to stay together here at Babel, going to build a big tower, and that's going to be the center of our religion. So God realizes they're as rebellious as they ever have been. So it seems at this point, God disinherits them. They've rejected God and his commands to spread around the earth and replenish it, and God rejects them and forces them to scatter around the world. He gets his way, of course, as God always will do. So God disinherits them. They don't want God. God says, I don't want you. I'm not going to be your God any longer. You're gone, right? And at that point, it seems that God chose to allocate some of the other gods to the nations. He's now disinherited them, but he's going to put a God over them who can provide some level of guidance and wisdom and direction in theory. It's just unfortunate that Psalms 82 tells us they failed. The other gods should have, imitated the God, Jehovah, but it looks like they blew it. I guess arrogant themselves, prideful themselves, right? And you can see some of this if we turn to Deuteronomy 32. So what I'm suggesting is that when God divided the nations at the Tower of Babel, that he then allocated a God, a son of God, to, or a prince, if you want, to the nations. Hence, we've got a prince over Persia. We've got a prince over Greece, or Javan, one of the nations we saw there in Genesis chapter 10. And this is brought out in several places. This is probably the clearest one, I think. If we turn to read verses 7 to 8 of Deuteronomy 32, this is the Song of Moses to the people of Israel. And he says, remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. So he's looking back centuries earlier to certain big events that took place. And we'll see the big event he has in mind is the Tower of Babel event. Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you when the Most High, Jehovah God, when the Most High divided their inheritance to the nations, plot of land, the territory that they would be given, when the Most High divided their inheritance to the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, which was at Tower of Babel, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. So that's telling us that at the Tower of Babel, God separated the nations, gave them specific territories that he had in mind, right? And that took place at Babel. And he divided the land up, he divided the earth up and gave them their inheritance, that plot of land between that river and that mountain range, etc. He set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. Now, that's probably not a very accurate translation. There's a couple of problems with it. Number one is, well, at Tower of Babel, there weren't any Israelites. You could hardly sort of split up the land according to the number of the children of Israel when there weren't any Israelites. Abraham hasn't been chosen yet. This was probably 500 years in the future before you had the Israelites leaving Egypt. At that point you can tell how many Israelites there are. But back at Babel, Israel doesn't exist. So inherently it's sort of like, doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, split the land up to all these nations according to the number of the Israelites, of which there aren't any? How can that make any sense? Well, it doesn't make much sense, I've got to say, but other translations bring out it very differently. So, for example, the ESV, the English Standard Version, and the RSV, the Revised Standard Version, they translate this latter part of verse 8. When the Most High divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. God looked at how many sons he'd got available, and he divided the land of the earth up to those sons, those God beings, to whom he then allocated, okay, you're over that territory, you're over that nation, you're over that nation, you're over that nation, right? So it looks like God divided the land and the nations according to the number of the sons of God. Or the Net translation, New English translation, says, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the heavenly assembly. Well, same thing, right? The divine council, the heavenly assembly, the number of gods and sons of God. And God split up the earth, and it looks like he allocated to each nation territory and a spirit being, a prince, an archon, a son of God over them. The Message translation, well, it's not a translation, it's a paraphrase, I suppose, but it's quite helpful here, I think. It makes it easy to grasp. The Message, when the high God gave the nations their stake, gave them their place on earth, he put each of the peoples within boundaries under the care of divine guardians. I think that's spot on, right? So God gave the nations into the care, each nation into the care of a divine guardian. Hence, Daniel 10, we find out there's an archon, a prince, a son of God over Greece, over Persia, and I assume over other nations as well. So God appoints a prince, a son of God, an archon, or you could use the term watcher, to each nation on the earth. But Psalm 82, where we started today, shows that by and large, if not entirely, they failed. God says, well, what are you doing? You gods, I said you're gods, but you're going to die like men because you've failed. You've not ruled and governed justly, right? You've not looked after people, the subjects that are in your nation, your terrain, your territory that are divided out. I divided the people of the world out, some over there, some over here. I allocated you gods to them, and you've utterly failed. Tell you what, you're going to die because you've not done the job. I'm not happy with that. That appears to be the case, right? But then, that's the nations of the world divvied up to the sons of God. But what about Jehovah God himself? Who does he have? Well, so earlier, I think we mentioned earlier, God chose Jacob and Israel for his special treasure. That's brought out here in verse 9. Deuteronomy 32 and verse 9. So verse 8 talks about God separates the sons of Adam and the nations get their inheritance, and he did that in accordance with the number of the sons of God, according to many translations. But verse 9, for the Lord's portion, Jehovah's portion, is his people. Jacob is the place of his inheritance. God's reserved Jacob, or Israel, for himself, which is why when you go through the Bible, you find that Jehovah God's always dealing with Israel and Jacob, right? Not dealing with Egypt, not dealing with Assyria, not dealing with Babylon, not dealing with Arabia, not dealing with any of those countries. God's dealing predominantly, at least 99% of the time, God deals with Israel because, verse 9 tells us, the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob, or Israel, is the place of his inheritance. God chose Israel, the promised land. That's where Jerusalem built. That's where the temple of God will be at Jerusalem. That's where God looks, to Jerusalem, to his temple. It's his territory, it's holy land. It's the holy land, right? But other nations aren't. Other nations are given over to other gods, other princes, other sons of God, other watchers, right? But God will continue to work with the descendants of his friend Abraham. And only them does God deal with. You often wonder, you read through the Bible and think, well, why doesn't God deal with other nations? How come he's just got, Israelites and so on? Why not others? What's wrong with the others? Was God sort of selfish in some way and just ignoring them, ignoring the Chinese and the Japanese and those in the North America, the Eskimos and the Indians of Latin America and South America? God ignoring them all? Temporarily, yes, because God has divided the earth into various nations under whom he has put them to the gods, the princes, the archons, the sons of God, as their divine guardians. But God's kept Israel to himself, which is why the story of the Bible is the story of Israel and God's dealings with Israel. Over time, God expects to bring back the others, of course, as well. But that's not working out too well at the moment. And I think if you look around the world today, if you look around your country, wherever you live, I can look around Britain today and think, what a mess. Right? It is a mess. I look around America, it looks like a mess. Canada looks pretty messy. Euthanasia, well, really? I think about 20% of all deaths are carried out by the state, I think, in Canada at the moment, something like that. And then, of course, you get Germany and Russia, and Somalia, Eritrea, Tunisia, Nigeria. Oh, my word. All the Christians are getting killed in Nigeria on a weekly basis. The world's troubled. It's in a bad place. But then you think about it, well, to what extent are the gods over the nations? Is there a God over Nigeria, a God over Kenya, a God over South Africa, a God over Zimbabwe? By the sound of it, there are. A spirit being, an archon, a prince over these territories, these nations, influencing the way they live. And from Psalms 82, doing a terrible job of that. So when you look around the world and its troubles and so on, its corruption, its violence, to what extent are the gods today over our nations influencing and orchestrating the problems that we've got? So the problems we've got are not just human nature. I mean, to extent, there's a lot of human nature there, but a lot of the troubles in our countries, it looks like, are not just human nature. They're also added to, amplified by, orchestrated by, influenced by spirit beings over our countries who are not doing a good job at all. And God's so upset with them that he's announced they will be terminated. When the time of judgment comes, God will kill, execute, bring to an end all of these spirit beings who've been given the opportunity but have blown it of looking after the nations of the earth. Okay, that's all I wanted to say today. A bit more to cover, I think, but we'll leave that, of course, until next week. So that's us finished for today.